All right. Well, thank you and good morning and welcome to what was spring, not so much currently. We'll talk more about that in a second and following up on some of Christie's advice and suggestions here. We probably the 50-degree threshold, we're going to probably in many parts of the state, it's going to be a little while anyway before we see that again. We've got a late piece of our winter that never was in many areas here for the next week or two, but I'll talk more about that in a second. I do want to spend some time. We typically talk more about where we're headed and our forecast than anything else. But given the winter season that we've just had and come through, there are a number of issues, and I just want to cover that. So we're gonna look at some climatology because to put some perspective on what we've just observed or experienced here. I think is probably important. No, everyone knows our winter was much milder than normal. These are a departure from normal for the upper Midwest here on the left-hand side. And anywhere from typically from 8 to as much as 12 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. Those are huge departures. It's a huge departure even for a month or a couple of weeks to go that high above or below normal. But for a 3-month period, just something we rarely see. And on the right-hand side is our precipitation. So that's all the liquid equivalent, both melted, frozen precip, which was a lot below normal, and any rainfall that fell. And you can see these are departures from normal expressed here, and you can see that it ranged from near to a little bit, even a bit above normal in the far southern part of the state to below normal or drier than normal, especially as you go north and west up into the Upper Peninsula. And I'll show you some results of that here in just a second. But again, back to the climatology and looking, where does that kind of a winter fit in with things? And the answer is, well, it's a new record, at least back to 1895. The late 19th century is really when we start to have enough records to say something conclusively about, and that's why that year is used to start. But this is a graphic depicting mean winter temperatures. So these are the months of December, January, and February each year, and those are the individual dots. And then we've got a green line in there, which is a moving average showing the longer term trends, and the blue line is a line or linear trend here overall. And one thing, again, with a record warm winter, and down below I've put some numbers. These just became available here early or last week from National Centers for Environmental Information. Our average temperature this winter was 30.5, which for the state, that's averaged across the state, was 10.3 degrees above normal. So not only do we set a new record, we really shattered the old one, which was 2001, 2002. That was the previous record. That was about 8.5 degrees above normal. And the other thing to note here too, you look at the graphic, you can easily see in the upper right hand where that fit in. And another one many people have asked about, what about 2011 and 2012, where we had the crazy heat wave during March? And that one was fourth warmest on record in terms of the winter. And you can see many of these have come recently. There is definitely a long-term trend. Michigan's warmer now than it was in decades past, but especially during the winter, and you can clearly see that here. And another trend that is also our winter this year is also consistent with, and that is that our minimum temperatures, our overnight temperatures were warmer on average, or more of that 10.3 degree departure than during the daytime, our maximum. So again, the mins are warming more quickly than the maximum temperatures, but still significantly warmer. And this one, again, in terms of the months, individual months too, there's all sorts of statistics here. December was the warmest December on record. February of this past February was the warmest on record. January, which had, of course, our for many areas, the only winter weather of the whole season in the middle of the month for about a 10-day period, that was fourth warmest on record. So again, to get 3 months like that, so unusual, it's not a surprise that we set a new record, but we did. And one other, an unusual, we talk about an unusually mild winter. Well, we did have during the middle of January, I mentioned a visit from the polar vortex and our jet stream changed for, again, about a week and a half, and it led to real winter conditions right there in the middle of the month. And we had one very, very cold air mass that was one of the first ones that came down from the Arctic down into the lower 48. The jet stream changed allowed that. And interestingly enough, the Great Lakes were unusually warm because of the mild air temperatures and the extreme minimum temperatures, which we don't typically look at as a variable very often, but that's also increasing in Michigan with time, the long-term trend. But on the right-hand side here, these are the minimum temperatures for this winter, and you can see that if unusual piece here that the southwestern lower and portions of interior northern or interior lower Michigan had the coldest temperatures. We had some extreme minima during that event in January down to -15. And the southwestern part of the state is climatologically the warmest. We also had temperatures that at that level or colder in the western UP, but as many of you know and appreciate, and thinking back about that, it was because during that outbreak, at least initially, we had southwesterly winds, which is also unusual. Typically, we see northwesterly winds with these kinds of weather systems, but this case we had southwest, and so southwestern lower Michigan, which is typically modified by being downwind of Lake Michigan, was not. And we had winds coming, in this case, out of the central plains and out of the central corn belt into the southern part of the state. And that's why they had extreme minimum temperatures, again, on the order of -10 to -15 Fahrenheit, while going northward up to places like Leelanau and northwestern lower Michigan, the minimum there was only +10. Very, very mild for very, very unusually mild, but it's because they had clouds, they had moderate modification of the air going across Lake Michigan, and lots of lake effect snow. Some areas during this outbreak, that mid part of January, picked up over 4 feet of snow. Much of it, again, was lake effect. So a lot of unusual pieces in this past winter, which is why I spent a little bit more time on it. During the last 30 days, obviously, it's been much milder than normal up until very, very recently here. And depending on location here on the right-hand side with our precip totals, a little bit wetter than normal in portions of lower Michigan, but definitely drier than normal as you move into upper Michigan, especially western upper Michigan. Another thing, couple more odds and ends here about where we've been recently and where we are right now. But I mentioned an unusually warm Great Lakes temperatures because of the mild temperatures. Right now, only about 0.6, less than 1% of the Great Lakes are covered by ice. And that is very, very, very unusual for this time of the year. You can see a couple graphics here. The one on the left, this is looking at Great Lakes average ice cover for the middle of March. And the normal here is in the dark or the red line. You can see it peaks typically late February, early March, but our current this year, 23, 24, is down in black. And you can see, and all of those individual lines, those are years going back to 1973. So individual seasons, and you can see that at least right now, it's probably the lowest ice cover on the lakes that we've seen in the last 40 to 50 years. So again, extraordinary, very, very unusual. And on the lower right-hand side here, this is coverage of ice on the Great Lakes as a whole, all the lakes. And there have been some extreme years like 2013-14 and 2014-15 in terms of how much, a large area, but there also have been more and more very, very limited years with ice cover. And this year is definitely one of those. It will go down certainly as one of the least ice covered winters that we've had on record. So another impact from the wild temperatures. Snowfall has been below normal, even with that big outbreak in the middle of January. And this is the totals on the left-hand side here so far through the 19th. The departures, I think, is what to look at. And you can see for almost all of the Great Lakes region, snowfall has been below normal. Some cases as much as 80 inches in some of the lake effect areas in the northern and northwestern parts of the state, below where we typically are with the total at this time of the year. Most of the rest of the state, though, significantly, some cases less than 50% of normal. So even with that concentrated area in January, we just have not seen much snow besides that. Now we're gonna help with that a little bit here over the next couple of days, but still we're getting into this transitional season, the spring season, so not much more. It's going to end up definitely with less snow than normal for the season. Finally, Where does that leave us in terms of dryness? And the answer is here increasing a little something at least to be of note in northern parts of the state. We have increased areas that are considered abnormally dry in long term, including now the introduction of some D2 moderate droughts and severe drought conditions, especially again in western upper Michigan. You can see that here with the latest drought monitor. About 78% of the state right now is categorized as abnormally dry or worse, but down to D2. But that's something to keep a look at. But remember too, our precip totals climatologically now are on the increase, and so we should see some probably some changes in this. I would expect over the next few weeks. But western upper Michigan is where we have the driest conditions, at least at this point in the year. In the southern part of the state, you can see some still normal, especially western, southwestern, lower Michigan are considered to be near normal for this time of the year. Okay, one last thing, and then we promise we'll go on to the forecast. Degree day accumulations with a record mild winter, especially during portions of February. First time, some of the warmest temperatures ever observed during the month of February, including some low 70s. We had degree day accumulations in much earlier than is typically the case. And that's what you can see here. These are running totals of base 50-degree days. It's at Grand Rapids, but it's representative of much of the state. And I've added here the last 10 years from other seasons. The average or the normal of those 10 years here is in dark black, and you can see it's way down here at the bottom of the graph. And 2023/24 is up here. Initially, we saw some of the earliest development or earliest accumulation of base 50-degree days that we've seen. It's again, well, it's a record warm winter, but the question was, how does it compare to 2012, where we had, remember, everything was so advanced? And the question or answer is here that yes, at least in late February and earlier in March, we were actually ahead of 2012. But remember, during 2012, it was really beginning in that first week of March, and you can clearly see that in here in red, where it shot up. We had a 3-week heat wave in March of 2012, and of course that's not the case now. And so we've fallen now currently behind once again. We're closer, or we're still much above normal, but we're closer to the pack than we were here 3 or 4 weeks ago. All this translates, though, to, and again, following up on some of Christie's comments, that in terms of degree day accumulations, much earlier than normal seasonal warm-up and beginning of development. This would be primarily for cool species. You could see it in wheat in Michigan. Clearly, wheat's base temperature is just near freezing. And so we have seen, certainly in the southern part of the state, beginning development of that, not so much in the far north, but it's responding to this warmth. And in terms of what it means climatologically, probably 3 to 4 calendar weeks ahead of where we typically are at this time of the year. But given where we are, where we've turned recently, and what the outlook is showing, probably going to see that line here, this running total, get a little bit closer once again to the rest of the pack. Nowhere near what we had in 2012. So that's, and for fruit growers and so forth with the perennials, that's a good thing. Although many of those crops have been brought out of their protective dormant states and are in development, but because of the weather we have now and over the next couple of weeks, they're going to be probably on a little bit more of a hold. And again, not too many 50-degree days on looking at our forecast here, thinking about any early weed control. Probably have to wait into early April or so would be the guess right now. Okay, so where are we headed here quickly? Here's our weather map this morning. We got some lake effect snow showers, northern parts of the state. Other than that, we'll call it mostly cloudy in many areas. A cold day, high temperatures from the 20s, mid and upper 20s north to the mid upper 30s in the south. So definitely below normal. So it's the first below normal temperatures we've seen here in the state for at least a month. But it's likely to continue for the next few days into the weekend with this cold pattern. We have Canadian origin air over the state, and it's going to be here for a couple days. However, by tonight, you can see a weather system off to our west, this area of low pressure, moving towards us east-southeastward from the northern plains. That's the next big weather system. A couple things about it. There's moisture with it, but it is weakening. as it moves to the east. And so there will be a limit to the amount of water here, but it is going to result in a significant snow event for at least portions of the state. And that will begin here overnight, late tonight, the early morning hours, and into tomorrow, depending on location, but mainly spread from west to east. Here's by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and the dark blue there, gray color, indicating steady light to moderate snowfall here, especially across portions of the central lower, developing and continuing through the morning hours, and finally coming to an end by tomorrow evening in most areas. But we will see accumulating shovelable snow in a number of areas of the state. Right now, it though looks like the greatest threat for accumulating snowfall across the central lower. We probably will see 4 to 8 inches in a band. You can see on the right-hand side there, these are the likely snowfall totals here between early tomorrow morning and then the following morning on Saturday. But again, most of this falls early Friday. Much the lower totals as you go south towards the Indiana and Ohio lines, and then lighter as you go north. So again, it looks like right now the central lower, especially north of I-96, is where we'll probably see the heaviest totals. Temperatures with this will be right around or maybe even a little bit above freezing. So it'll be the wet, heavy type of snow, a little bit harder to clear off, but that's what we typically see this time of the year. But we haven't had much snow this year, but it is likely that we will see the need to remove some of this here as the day goes on tomorrow. And after that, a cool, or we'll call it cold, and cloudy, windy weekend here for most of Saturday and Sunday. Another weather system, though, comes out of the Central Plains by Monday or overnight Sunday into Monday. You can see the weather map here for conditions on 8 o'clock Monday. In contrast to this system over the next 24 hours, which will move to our south, this one will go to our west, which puts Michigan on the warm side of the system. So instead of there will be some frozen precipitation initially in places like western upper Michigan, but much of the state will see only liquid or rainfall. We will also see a noticeable warm up by Monday and Tuesday of next week. Temperatures back up into the 40s south, 30s north, certainly above freezing, and that's why the precipitation will be liquid at that time. Now, in terms of precipitation with these two events, that's what's expected here generally over the next week. 1/4 to 1/2 inch tonight, tomorrow, and then in the system early next week. So looking at the totals here, that brings us up to as much as an inch, maybe a little bit more than that across southern parts of the state here by next week. And again, a lot of that will be in frozen form. So a fairly wet week, a fairly active storm track, and that's what the medium range suggests here. Michigan on the boundary between colder than normal conditions to our west, warmer than normal to our east. That's true both in the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day. The other thing to note, above normal precipitation with that active storm track. That's also true for both of these forecasts. And then finally, looking at our long lead outlooks, they do return. We've still got an El Nino in progress in the Pacific, but that is transitioning to neutral here by the summer with La Nina. That's the cool episode, or cool phase of ENSO by this fall. There's going to be some new data. We'll talk about that next week. But I think the important thing is our medium and certainly our long lead outlooks continue to point towards milder or warmer than normal conditions as we move into April, the spring, and probably continuing on into the summer as well, with not much direction on precip. And with that, I'm going to wrap up, and I'll introduce next week's speaker, and that's Dr. Kim Cassada.
Actually, we have somebody.
Yeah, it's different, Jeff.
Oh,
I can share mine if that's okay,
that'd
Phil.
be fine. Sure.
Okay.
My bad. Sorry about that.
All right, so next week actually is not Kim Cassada. We will have her on. I'm not sure which date off the top of my head, but I think in another 5-ish so speakers. Next week, actually, what we have on is a person I don't think we've ever had before, and that's Ian McDonald. He comes from the University of Guelph, and he's going to be talking to us about repairing damaged fields for the 2024 season.